Last year, this time, I lost my dad. So it seems as if every day I'm in the mourning process.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Anything? Yes, ma'am. The mic may not get to you. Just if you could try to project.
And it is secondary in my mind that I've had so many losses and changes in my personal life. A lot of people see me come on here and I smile and I appear to be doing okay. And in the big scheme of things, I am. But when I think back of how it could have been if I didn't lose my brother, my mother, my father, and then another loss that is now regaining some kind of a purpose in life, it sucks you dry. And there are times when you question yourself, okay, so what do I do with this? Where do I go with this? To whom should I speak? And so you internalize, you become quiet, and you have to be careful that it doesn't spill over to others.
Sure. So one thing that we've heard, and thank you for sharing, one thing that we've heard universally, and everyone's experienced that spoke, grief is unique. Grief is different. We've had individuals talk about the loss of a pet, changes in terms of friends and close relationships, people moving away, a loss of self, a loss of loved ones, compounded losses that involve multiple people that have been lost. Yes, I see one more. We have one more over here. Yes, just share with us.
Good afternoon to everyone. Yes, I have lost family members, my mom, my son. My son is about 16 years now. But, people says that they grieve, and I don't know how to what should I say? No, not process. How to grieve. Mm-hmm. Put it in that way. I don't know how to grieve, because people said, how you do that, Sandra? By, like people want to see you, quiet. They want to see you talk about the situation. But I just go about my business as usual. Yes, it comes to me sometimes that, oh, my son is not there. But I come to realize that we have to lose people, because I don't want to be that mean. We have to go someday. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that is a bad way in thinking about when you lost somebody. If I should be happy, if I should be sad. My son, he had a terrible death. And then my daughter had another situation with my daughter where they set her on fire. She almost dead. And I'm not hating on the people that do it, because what I say to myself, that the people that did it, that killed my son, the people that tried to kill my daughter, I have to have, if I don't forgive myself. If you don't have forgiveness in yourself, you cannot have forgiveness for the people that did such a, bad stuff to your family. And if somebody dead in your family with a sickness, it is bad also that why they have to go like that. But I don't know if I'm harsh or if I'm terrible in thinking in that way. But I think I don't have no fear of the situation.
I got you. All right. Well, thank you.
I'm hurting, but
Sure.
you know.
Sure. Well, definitely thank you for sharing. So one thing that we understand about grief is the universal, natural, and normal response to loss. There's nothing abnormal about us having an emotional, cognitive, physiological, physical response to the losses that we experience. But one of the things, if grief is the normal, natural response to loss, one of the things that's important for us to understand and realize is that we don't grieve the loss of things. We don't grieve the loss even of people. We grieve the loss of relationships. So that someone can grieve the loss, and we don't compare losses, that's one thing we don't do, but someone could grieve the loss of a pet, and someone could grieve the loss of a child. And they have very similar reactions and responses to the loss because we grieve relationships. And oftentimes, the strength of those relationships determine how we navigate our periods of grief, right? One more question that before we get into sort of defining what grief is and talking a little bit more about what I have on the slides. Put up this next question. And for those of you who've grieving, how many of you all have experienced instances where people have said the wrong thing to you or something that wasn't helpful to you? Anyone ever have anyone give me an example of the unhelpful things that people say to you? Just go on and shout them out. Yes. Don't cry. Time heals all wounds. What was that? Don't worry about it. Man, that's terrible. Lord Jesus. Yeah. Yeah, I understand. Okay, anyone else? It could be worse. Oh my.
They've gone to a better place.
It's just a part of life. It's someone else?
When my brother passed away, we were having a funeral, and someone came up to me and said, let's get this thing over with.
So, one of the things that's true is many of us, we don't know what to say to people who are grieving. Can we be honest? So what's the answer for not knowing what to say when someone is grieving?
Support.
Silence is one of the most impactful things that you can say to a griever. Presence. Instead of saying, we search for something to say because the truth of the matter is, many of us, we are not comfortable with handling grief ourselves. So if I can get you to turn off your emotions, I don't have to be with mine. If I can somehow get you to stop your tears, this is why we tell people don't cry, or we hand out tissues at funerals. If I could get you to stop crying, then you won't trigger my emotional responses. Because I'm uncomfortable, so I want you to make me more comfortable by turning off your pain. So oftentimes we say things to people that are unhelpful in helping them work through or walk through the process of grief. How about, has anyone ever heard, oh, I lost my mother too, so I know how you feel? Yeah? Remember I told you we grieve relationships, right? Two people can lose the same person and have two completely grief reactions. Why? Because we don't grieve people, we grieve relationships. And so families, they'll grieve differently. Siblings, they'll grieve differently. All right? All right. Okay, so We all know that there are a lot of things that we believe about grief or have been exposed to about grief that have been unhelpful to grievers. So one thing that I'm going to try to do is I'm going to help you sort of walk through what it is that we can do, not only to help individuals through their grief, but also to be more understanding about even our own grief. All right, hit this next slide for me. This is a definition of grief, I hope. Yep, there we go. Grief is the what? Can you all see that? Oh, yes. Oh, man, I got to turn around because now I can see. Grief is the normal and natural response to loss, right? Here's the next definition. Grief is a series of intense physiological responses that occur following a loss. And then this last one is what I said when we started. Any significant change in behavior creates grief, right? So any significant change in any normal pattern of behavior or relationship is how we define grief. Hit this next slide for me if you don't mind. These are the common reactions to grief. Now, we break these up into these 4 categories: the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual reactions to grief. And anyone give me an idea of if you've experienced or have encountered any of these? One of the most difficult things about especially losing loved ones is how we handle people who grieve at work. When they give you 3 days and think you can go back to work and be productive. What is one of the biggest things? What is one of those things on there? Memory problems, an inability to focus. Right? I sat with a client one time where she was one exit away from where she was going after finding out her husband died, and she ended up in a whole nother state. So overwhelmed with sadness and grief, she was numb to even where she was going. And we think people can turn around and go back to work in 3 days. Anyhow, so here's some of the symptoms. Numbness, all right? Sadness, depression, tears. Now, oftentimes, oh boy, do I want to talk about this? Okay, yeah, I do. They have removed, in terms of pathology, grief from the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Illnesses. Now, one of the things that they like to tell people is that they have depressive symptoms if they're grieving. They may tell you that you're depressed or you're anxious. Now, depression is a disease of the mind. We understand each other, right? You understand? Grief is a disease of the heart, right? Because you are sad and you experience a range of emotions that may appear like or look like depression, it does not mean that you are depressed, you are sad. So oftentimes, because, okay, yeah, they can't medicate a broken heart, but they can give you medicine for disequilibrium in your mind. So that's why many grievers who come, they diagnose them with depression because they could give you a pill for depression. There's no way to deal with grief except to sit in it and sit with it and allow the pain to help you heal. Right? All right. So these are the common reactions to grief. Put up this next slide for me. One of the biggest challenges that many individuals, if you all hit the next one for me, one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people get into is people who make them feel as if their grief is greater or different than someone else's. We love to compare losses. We love to tell people, oh, I lost this person, I know how you feel. Or, you know, I've lost my job too. I know what it's like to lose a job. Now, one thing that we have to understand is there are different types of grief. Normative grief is what we just talked about. There also is anticipatory grief. Many people don't understand that they're grieving because they're expecting or anticipating some tragedy or some loss to occur. Now, the challenge with anticipatory grief, especially we see it in individuals that are dealing with parents or loved ones that have dementia or Alzheimer's, is that you are grieving already the loss of someone cognitively. You're grieving a relationship that now has changed. However, the person physically is still here. So in those instances, the grief is sort of compounded, and you think that, hey, I'm processing the fact that this person does not recognize me or know me, and then all of a sudden, if you think you're ready to deal with the physical separation hits you, and it hits you like a ton of bricks. All right? So there's anticipatory loss. There's also ambiguous losses. Ambiguous losses are those things that you don't recognize are losses. I'm a pastor, and so one of the things that I try my hardest to help my administrators see is the impact of moving pastors that have children. Okay, we don't understand the impact that it has on children that have to move from place to place. That not only do they lose homes, but they lose school friends, they lose church friends, right? And so oftentimes we think, oh, because we are, our children are resilient, they can move and they can deal with it. A lot of times you'll see that when children have experienced great, moves where they've lost friends or moves where they've lost places of comfort, you'll start to realize that their grades start to suffer. You'll start to realize there's acting out behaviors. The children oftentimes are dealing with grief because, like I said, any significant change in any normal pattern of behavior creates loss, creates grief. All right? Okay. All right. And then there's also this last one called disenfranchised grief. This is one of the types of grief that was very rampant in COVID, because for many of us that were blessed enough to not get COVID and pass away, for those of us who were blessed enough to not lose loved ones to COVID, we had to put aside the fact that we lost something called, put up this next slide. We had to put aside the fact that we lost something called normalcy. That we lost the ability to gather together, we lost the ability to see one another, we lost the ability to what's up, man? We lost the ability to, Alistair, this your kid? This your kid? That's your son? Your father just disowned you, man. Alistair, come on. It's okay, man. It's your world, young man, it's your world. Yeah. Anyway, all right. For many of us, we were not able to, many of us, we had to be stuck at home. And some of us didn't like the people we were stuck at home with. Come on, man. Look, I'm a therapist. You think marriage counseling was tough when you could go to work and be away from the person. Imagine how difficult it was when you were stuck in the house with them and you couldn't go nowhere. All right, so for many people, especially during COVID, they experienced this disenfranchised grief or this loss of normalcy. And then there's some people, and so many people felt like they had to put aside the psychological reactions to their grief because they weren't dying, because they weren't in the hospital. And so I couldn't tell people, yo, I'm having anxiety attacks, I'm having panic attacks, I'm driving myself crazy being in this house looking at four walls. We dismissed it because we didn't feel like, because our problem wasn't as great as other people who were struggling, we didn't have a right or a place to express the pain that we were going through during that time of separation. All right, loss of normalcy. Put up this next slide for me. I don't remember what's on it because my phone turned on. All right, so we talked about all this, disenfranchised grief. All right, we can skip this one. Take a picture. All right, too late. All right, so we talked about this too, the impact of COVID on grief. So let's go to this next slide. I think I only got two more, and then I'll take questions. All right, someone read this that can see it, because I can't see it, it's too small. Yeah. People ask me all the time, how or when am I going to stop grieving? And I have to break to them the bad news that grief lives as long as love lives. And if love doesn't die, grief does not die. Now, there are aspects of our physiological, our psychological, cognitive reactions to grief that will dissipate. Not with time. Time doesn't do anything but pass. With what we do with time, there are some things that could help us sort of mitigate the reactions and responses that we have. However, grief lives as long as love lives. And if you can't put aside the love, you're not going to be able to put aside the grief. So how do we then go about the process of making sure that we're able to manage our grief reactions in an appropriate way? We'll talk about that in a second. All right, one more time, one more slide. I think there's another quote. Nope. All right. All of you all have heard of Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. They're not really stages of grief, they're stages of dying. But everyone heard of those, where you're supposed to navigate these stages of grief? And this is William Worden's tasks of mourning. These are the things. All right, throw all that out of your mind. That doesn't make any sense, because grief is personal, and grief is experienced on an individual level by all grievers. So, what they've discovered is they've come up with all kinds of models for the treatment of grief. These are two of the most popular ones, where we have to move between the stages. We have to get to denial, to anger, to bargaining, and finally, at the end of it all, we get a certificate. Hey, we've moved to acceptance. Are you still grieving and are you still in pain? Absolutely, but you're accepted. It doesn't help you. Whatever, who cares? The next is William's tasks of mourning. He suggests that if a griever is supposed to move from the psychological pain that they experience at the onset of grief to being able to accept the loss and navigate the world in relationship to that loss, these are the tasks that they have to go through. And you see them there on the screen. What I want to free you all from is, one, the necessity of thinking you need to use someone else's language to help you navigate the own pain of your heart, right? You have to find your own language to navigate your own grief. And then the second thing is, for many of us, the reason that our grief is so impactful, can get complicated or prolonged, is because we have unfinished business with those individuals or those entities that we have lost. When I say unfinished business, how many of you all ruminate over the things you wish you could have said? The wish you could have done. Oh, I wish for the life of me I had one more phone call. Yeah, grief is literally a reaching out for someone that has always been there, only to discover that they're no longer there. Or the converse to that is grief is reaching out for someone who's never been there and realizing they still ain't there. All right? Okay. Let me hit this last slide, then I'll take your questions. So what do we do with our grief? I think. Okay, yeah, this is useful. I didn't remember this was on here. I can't read that. We can't go through our lives without experiencing some loss. We need to give ourselves time and space to mourn. All right, whatever. This last one. These are the 4 spheres by which we teach or we ask people to work within, next slide, to work within in order to heal themselves from their losses. These are the 4 domains that we normally get. Is this on there? Nope. 2 more the other way. 1 more. Is it there? That's it? There's no more? I didn't include it? There got to be 1 more. There you go. All right. Here it is. Self-care for our grief. So we break it up into coping strategies that we can utilize in these 4 spheres. I didn't include the spiritual one here because you all are Christian. You all can pretty much guess what to do spiritually to help you heal your grief. Here it is, physical. These are some of the suggestions that we give people. Develop a routine. Oftentimes, grief distracts us. It is a distracting condition, right? So develop a routine. Routine that you do not because you feel like it, but because you know you have to do it. Right? So developing a routine. The next is eating a healthy diet, right? Because one of the things that we know for people who grieve, this is why the casserole ministry comes, because one of the things people know is that you don't feel like eating when you are sad. Or the converse is you feel like overeating when you're sad. All right, so here's the next one. Exercise, and then don't confuse your symptoms. When I say don't confuse your symptoms, what I mean is, don't think that you are depressed because you can't get out of bed. When you're grieving someone, that is not a condition of your head, that is a condition of your heart. We understand each other? All right. Here's this next one. The cognitive domain. We have to learn to be intentional about giving ourselves a break. One of the things we love to do when grief comes is we love to try to stay busy. Or we love to try to overwork ourselves so that we don't have to feel with or sit with the pain. So if I can stay busy, then at least I'm not sad. If I can stay busy, I can at least put aside what it is that I need to do in order to help myself heal. Now, it is very incredibly normal for at the onset of losing someone for there to be a lot to do. And oftentimes we can get so bogged down in the doing that it hits us like a ton of bricks a couple of weeks later, you know, when the phone calls have stopped and the casserole train has stopped and the funeral is over and we're now alone recognizing that the person that we've lost is no longer there. There's no more visit we can make. There's nothing else, right? We then get to the point where we begin to put ourselves more into our job or put ourselves more into our other relationships. The problem is when we just push aside our pain, it stays there. It doesn't go anywhere. It stays with us. It's present with us. All right, let me get through these rest of these so that we can get to the questions. Accept your humanity. Then you see the emotional ones. It's not all that deep. Be honest with yourself about how you feel. Now, I'm not saying tell everybody and their mama that you're having a rough time, but how about you at least not lie? How about you at least not say I'm fine? How about you say, you know what, I'm struggling. And if you don't want to answer questions, I don't want to talk about that right now, but I'm having a difficult time. Fine. That's better than lying to yourself and others saying, oh, I'm fine, or, oh, God will make a way. Or, you know, I guess you could say pray for me. Yes, I guess. But half y'all say that because y'all want to, never mind. All right. Okay. Engage in your self-soothing activities. Find a way to engage your five senses in order to help yourself soothe. Now, what do I mean? What are the things that I can smell that help ground me? What are the things that I can feel that help ground? Is there a favorite meal that I have that I can eat that will help me help ground my emotions, right? So your five senses, yeah, figure it out. And then the last one, how do we ask for help I'm trying to get to the questions. How do we ask for help socially? Like I said this morning, we as a people, we sort of grieve and heal in community. And one of the things that we do know from the research that grieving in groups have helped people because it helps people realize that they're not alone. That while someone does not understand uniquely what I'm going through, that there are people that are going through what I'm going through, that are experiencing the same symptoms. See, one of the things grief does is grief loves to isolate us, to make us feel like we are alone, and only us are going through these sort of challenges and problems. And the beautiful thing about community is it allows us to know that, you know, everybody's life stinks. That it's not just me, that everybody's going through problems, and it's not just me, that everybody is grieving and trying to make it, and it's not just me. All right, here's the other one. Fight the urge to grieve alone. This is a big one. We need one another, and we need to be able to let people know that we have needs and challenges that we cannot solve or cannot work through on our own. All right, do I have another slide on there, or this was it? That was it? Oh, good, I'm done working. All right, any questions? Any questions? No questions? What the, oh, okay, yes, sir.
Mr. Moore, comment.
Yeah, sure.
The comment you made a short while ago about the unfinished business. I was about by that. And it was until I was in my 20s that I started having a bond relationship with him. But when he became sick, right, and I realized that, as the song says, don't scatter roses after I'm gone. I called him on the phone a couple of years ago, and he and I were talking, and the conversation was flowing. And I said, Daddy, I love you. He has never heard that before. And you could hear the silence on the other line. I said, Daddy, are you there? I said, uh-huh. And I realized that after that, telling him I loved him became more frequent. So when he finally passed away, as you spoke about unfinished business, I was grieving, but somehow the fact that I told him that I loved him, and he heard it, and he accepted and said, yes, I know. That helped me in the grieving process. So the unfinished business, I have heard people crying at funerals and say, I wish I had told my mom and my dad that I love them. Yeah. So I'm saying the unfinished business is real. So tell people how you feel. If you love them, tell them no. It might be unusual, but tell the person how you feel, because telling my dad I loved him helped me in my grieving process and accepting his death. So it helps out.
And not only that, but also letting people know, listen, many of us, we have apologies that we need to make to people. Well, how do you can't make apologies after someone is gone. But I still have to get that apology out. Some of us have to forgive some people. And the reason that the grief is staying with you is because you're still holding on to what they did to us. You're keeping that person alive with your unforgiveness. Many people, I can't grieve. I have not yet been able to. Many of us is because we are holding on to some amount of pain or some amount of difficulty, right? All right. Yes, I see your hands, the KB. Yes. Hello, ma'am. Oh, you paid attention. You wrote your question down. Oh,
Sorry, why do we need to grieve with others? What if no one knows about your situation?
So not that we need to grieve with others, right? However, there is a benefit and a catharsis in being with other people who are also in the state of grief. Now, you can grieve individually with someone. You can grieve, or you can share your challenges that you may have that are unique with a therapist, with a professional. So if you're concerned about someone else knowing your business, you can put your business with a professional if you'd like, right? But we do see a significant impact of grief groups helping people navigate their grief responses. All right? Okay, any other questions? Yes. Sister Drumgo.
Yes, Dr. David. I want to be transparent because I know we are overcome by the word of our testimony. Is this my phone?
Yeah.
You talk about the effects of forgiveness that hadn't been expressed.
Sure.
Once the person involved with that situation, whoever was the person who needed to apologize, whatever the dynamic was, once one person is dead in that relationship, there's a problem for the survivor. Mm-hmm. My life story is this. God answered my prayers and gave me the desires of my heart in my relationship with my mother in the last 14 years of her life. Once she was in a rehab nursing home, and she couldn't run around like she normally would. Once she was captive, and we could all get to her when we could get to her, which was often, I started to see the things that I wanted all along beginning to unfold. It wasn't necessarily because either one of us had new tools. It's because God started moving. I always say that the older we get, the stronger our strengths and the stronger our weaknesses become. And then when you start to move towards dementia and things like that, or whatever the thing is that comes before that, and I'm sorry, I can't remember. Who said that? You know
Focus.
what I'm talking about, David.
Yes.
I'm focusing. Something happens before dementia sets in. When that process begins, cognitive stuff gets lost.
Sure.
God used one of the CNAs where my mother was living to begin to reprogram her feelings towards me. And all the prayers that I've been praying for all those decades began to unfold and be manifested because of what this little sweet Haitian CNA was saying to my mother. She watched my mother reject me when I would come, and I would travel from a distance, and I would come very often. And if I was working in Boston, I would come 2 or 3 times a week, especially if I was in the hood. This one little CNA started saying, you can't treat her, you can't treat her. But then she switched the narrative, and she started to say, oh, look, Helen, here comes your favorite daughter. Oh, look, Helen, here comes your favorite daughter. And my mother started to believe that I was her favorite daughter. And the whole dynamic shifted from a place of rejection to acceptance. And she started to look forward to seeing me come in the room. And there wasn't that tension that I had to work past to get to the place where I could love on her. It was a beautiful thing. So it may take, and God did he did one more thing around forgiveness. He said, Kina, you're not going to get closure with your mother before she dies. And when he said that to me, I knew where the closure was going to come from. And that's exactly what happened. I loved on her and I forgave her, and I shared my apologies with her and didn't expect anything in return. But when she died, I had 0 regrets. I have not had one sleepless night over anything I did not get to do with her. And God revealed to me everything and gave me all the closure I needed, just the Holy Spirit in me over the next 18 months. Sure. So I just want to encourage people that, one, when we don't know how to get to the place where the relationship can be as whole as we want it to be, or we don't know how to get to the place where we see the desires of our heart fulfilled, God does. He has a plan. Don't give up. And be open to who he uses to get you to that place where you see your prayers answered. And if you can't get closure from the person while they're alive, don't sweat the small stuff. God has got your closure for you. Forgive while they're alive and do everything you can to love them so that you don't have any regrets when they're gone. Because once that door is closed, you're living with that stuff.
Sure.
But I just wanted to share my testimony in all transparency. I love my boo. I love my boo, and I understand the circumstances that developed before I was even here that led to our dynamic.
Yeah.
So I want to cover her with grace, but I just wanted to share that to encourage folks.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I got time for one more question, and then I think my time is up. I'll take if that is you.
Thank you. As the Bible says, the living know that they're going to die, but the dead does not know that they are dead. How relevant it is for us as Seventh-day Adventists, as Christians, to, and I know I've heard and seen this happening, people go and visit graves of their loved ones. Is that of any help, of any use? Just asking.
I mean, it depends on you and who you are. It depends on your purpose for going. Now, as a Seventh-day Adventist, our theology does not lend itself to thinking that you can go to the grave and talk to someone. However, there may be a catharsis of going to the grave and expressing some things that you have to the spot that you have laid your loved one to rest at. Sure, there are continuing bonds. We do have a so know this, our physical relationship with our loved ones leave us, but there is still an emotional, psychological, spiritual relationship that continues. You understand? The physical relationship is ended, but we still have a relationship to that and with that person, and that they are a part of us. And so, no, the person's not going to hear you. However, if that's one of the things that you do to memorialize or to help yourself, grieve, by all means. So our theology doesn't lend itself. Our theology robs us of not being able to feel that our loved ones are in heaven looking down on us. We're robbed with the truth. Because I know there are a lot of people, for real, there are a lot of people that I sit with in therapy that are comforted by the fact that their loved one is in heaven not suffering. And I want to tell them, but I don't, because it's not my business. Well, we're not, okay, robbed may be the wrong word. But that's the easiest word that I could come up with. See, we find our own language. Let me go before I get in trouble. Pastor, is that all I'm supposed to? Okay, thank you all for your time and your attention. I do hope that you all stay for the 4 o'clock program. And it's good seeing you all.
David will be back